been said that Pam Ewing and Victoria Principal couldn't be more different. I know that you may have said this before, but for a British audience, obviously we haven't seen you before. Are you very different from the character you portray?
At 76, Victoria Principal is remembered as the woman who walked away from Dallas Hollywood and a marriage worth millions. But her divorce from Dr. Harry Glassman was not some sudden Hollywood collapse. It was the final chapter in a much longer pattern. Every time life tried to trap Victoria inside someone else's version of her, she found the door. And the real reason she left her husband begins long before Beverly Hills. The woman who never stayed where life put her. Victoria Principal's life began in motion. She was born on January 3, 1950, in Fukuoka, Japan, to Victor Rocco Principal, a United States Air Force sergeant, and Bertha Ree Principal. Because her father served in the military, stability was not something Victoria grew up expecting. Her childhood was split across different cities, countries, schools, accents, and routines. She lived in places like London, Puerto Rico, Florida, Massachusetts, and Georgia, and attended 17 different schools, including the Royal Ballet School, while her family was stationed in England. For most children, that kind of constant change would feel like chaos. For Victoria, it became training. She learned early that nothing stayed fixed forever. Not homes, not friendships, not identities, and certainly not the plans other people made for her. That is the first thing the competitor script understood well. It did not begin with the divorce. It began with the woman behind it. If you only tell the story of Victoria leaving Harry Glassman, it sounds like another celebrity breakup. But if you look at her entire life, the divorce starts to make more sense. Victoria had never been the type to remain in a life simply because it looked impressive from the outside. She had moved too many times, survived too many turns, and reinvented herself too often to believe that comfort was the same as happiness. That is the deeper story here. Victoria Principal did not become independent because her marriages failed. Her marriages struggled because independence had always been the strongest part of her. The accident that changed her future. Before the red carpets, before Pamela Barnes Ewing, before Dallas turned her into one of the most recognizable women on television, Victoria Principal was not even sure acting was going to be her life. She had started young, appearing in commercials at the age of 5, but she also had serious ambitions outside Hollywood. She enrolled at Miami-Dade Community College with the intention of studying medicine. It was a practical dream, a structured dream, the kind of future that suggested discipline and control. Then, one drive home from the library changed everything. Victoria was involved in a serious car accident with a drunk driver, and the injuries forced her into a long recovery. That kind of event does something to a person. It interrupts the life they thought they were building and forces them to ask whether they truly want to return to the same path. For Victoria, the answer was no. She was faced with the possibility of retaking her first year of studies after almost finishing it. And instead of forcing herself back into the old plan, she chose something radical. She moved to New York City to pursue acting. Then she studied in London, including work connected to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, before finally making her way to Los Angeles. This moment matters because it shows the first major pattern in Victoria's life. When something broke, she did not simply patch it up and continue pretending. She changed direction completely. The accident did not just end one plan. It revealed something about her character. Victoria was capable of walking away from a future that no longer felt like hers, even if that meant starting over in a much more uncertain world. Years later, when people tried to understand why she left a long marriage, a massive television show, and even Hollywood itself, the answer was already there. Victoria did not stay attached to a life just because she had invested time in it. Hollywood discovers Victoria Principal. Victoria's first major film breakthrough came in 1972 with The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, where she played Marie Elena. The role brought her attention and a Golden Globe nomination for Most Promising Newcomer. It was the kind of early recognition that can make Hollywood believe it has found a new star to shape. But Victoria was never easy to shape. She was beautiful, yes, but she was also strategic. She understood very early that beauty could open a door, but it could also become a cage if she allowed the industry to decide what kind of woman she was allowed to be. After Judge Roy Bean, her career moved through films like The Naked Ape, Earthquake, I Will, For Now, and Vigilante Force. Some projects worked better than others, but even the less successful ones taught her something useful. Hollywood was not a reliable protector. It could celebrate a woman one year and discard her the next. It could praise her face while ignoring her instincts. It could offer fame while quietly taking control of the narrative. Victoria watched all of this closely, and unlike many young actresses of the era, she did not seem content to simply wait for the phone to ring. That is why she briefly stepped away from acting between 1975 and 1977 and worked behind the camera as a talent and booking agent. This was not the move of someone who only wanted applause. It was the move of someone who wanted to understand power. She wanted to know how deals were made, how careers were managed, how decisions happened before the audience ever saw the final result. That experience would matter later, because when Dallas arrived, Victoria was not just another actress hoping for a lucky break. She was a woman who had already learned that the person who controls the contract often controls the future. The role she could not refuse. When Victoria received the script for Dallas, something changed. She had considered law school and had already begun building a life outside full-time acting. But Pamela Barnes Ewing pulled her back in. The role felt different. Pam was not just a pretty woman standing beside powerful men. She was emotionally central to the story. She was the bridge between the Barnes and Ewing families, the heart of the feud, the woman caught between love, loyalty, class, ambition, and betrayal. In a series filled with oil money, schemes, power plays, and family warfare, Pam gave Dallas its emotional core. Victoria understood that immediately. She later spoke about falling in love with the part, and that feeling showed on screen. Her chemistry with Patrick Duffy, who played Bobby Ewing, became one of the show's most important emotional engines. While Larry Hagman's J.R. Ewing became the villain everyone loved to hate, Pam and Bobby gave the audience someone to root for. Their relationship made the drama feel personal. Without Pam, Dallas would have still had money, power, and betrayal. With Pam, it had heartbreak. Dallas became a phenomenon. It premiered in 1978 and grew into one of the biggest television events of its era. The Who Shot JR mystery became a cultural obsession. Millions of viewers tuned in, not just in America, but around the world. Victoria Principal was suddenly not just an actress. She was Pamela Barnes Ewing in the minds of fans everywhere. That level of fame can be thrilling, but it can also be suffocating. And once again, Victoria found herself inside a role that other people wanted her to keep playing forever. Why Dallas explains the marriage. The most important thing to understand about Victoria Principal is that she left Dallas before the show left her. She could have stayed. She could have accepted the safety of a huge paycheck, a beloved role, and a guaranteed place in television history. Instead, she walked away in 1987 after 9 years. Her decision was not impulsive. She had become concerned about the writing and the direction of the character, and she did not want to be trapped forever as Pam Ewing. To stay too long in her mind would have sealed her fate in the industry. That decision explains a lot about her personal life. Victoria was not afraid of commitment, but she was afraid of being absorbed. There is a difference. She could commit to hard work, to a role, to a company, to a relationship, and to a dream. What she could not accept was losing the right to define herself. Dallas gave her fame, money, and identity. But the moment it began to feel like a cage, she started planning her exit. That same instinct would appear later in her marriage to Harry Glassman. The new insight in this script is simple. Victoria did not leave people and projects because she was restless. She left when the identity around her became too small. She left Dallas when Pam Ewing threatened to swallow Victoria Principal. She left Hollywood when business and wellness gave her more control than acting. And years later, she left her marriage when the life built around it no longer seemed to match who she had become. Her divorce was not an isolated scandal. It was part of a lifelong refusal to disappear inside someone else's story. The first marriage that could not survive Dallas. Victoria's first marriage was to Christopher Skinner, a writer-producer she met in 1978 when he appeared in a small role on Dallas. The relationship moved quickly. According to accounts, it took only a few dates before they believed they wanted to build a future together. They married during the period when Dallas was beginning to explode, and that timing turned out to be a problem. The woman Christopher married was not just Victoria at home. She was becoming one of the busiest women on television. Her schedule was intense. The competitor's script pointed out that she was working exhausting hours, and that pressure became too much for the marriage. Victoria later acknowledged that she had married just before Dallas became enormous, and that Christopher wanted a more traditional marriage with a wife who was more available at home. That was not the life Victoria could offer at the time, and more importantly, it was not the life she wanted to shrink herself into. Their divorce was filed in 1980 and finalized in 1981. It was short, but it was revealing. Victoria's first marriage showed the conflict that would return again and again. Love could not survive if it required her to become smaller. She was building something, and she was not going to apologize for the fact that her career mattered. The world might have expected a woman to soften her ambitions for marriage, but Victoria did not. She had worked too hard to reach that point, and she was not prepared to turn herself into someone else's idea of a proper wife. Andy Gibb and the heartbreak she could not save. After Christopher Skinner came one of the most emotional relationships of Victoria's life. Andy Gibb. Andy was the youngest brother of the Bee Gees and already had the charm, talent, and vulnerability that made people fall for him quickly. He and Victoria met in 1981 on The John Davidson Show, and the connection was immediate. Andy had admired her from afar, and once they met, the admiration turned into a real romance. Together, they recorded a duet of All I Have to Do Is Dream, which became the only single Victoria ever released and the last single of Andy's career. On the surface, it looked like a glamorous pairing, the Dallas star and the young pop singer. But behind the romance, there was a darker reality. Andy was struggling with substance problems, and Victoria eventually made the painful decision to walk away. She later said their breakup was preceded and precipitated by his substance use, and that she had done what she could to help before telling him he had to choose between her and the problem. That line is crucial because it reveals something about Victoria's boundaries. She could love someone and still leave. She could feel compassion and still refuse to be destroyed. Andy was devastated by the breakup, and after his death in 1988, the story became even more tragic. Some tried to frame Victoria as the woman who broke his heart, But that version is unfair because it ignores the impossible position she was in. She could not save a man who was not ready to save himself. The Andy Gibb chapter is important because it shows that Victoria did not leave only when love disappeared. Sometimes she left because love was not enough to make a situation healthy. Meeting Dr. Harry Glassman. Victoria met Dr. Harry Glassman in 1983. He was a prominent Beverly Hills plastic surgeon, successful, respected, and connected to the world of beauty and status that surrounded Hollywood. At the time, both of them were coming out of emotional complications. Victoria had gone through the pain of Andy Gibb. Harry was dealing with his own divorce from his former wife, Jane. They were adults with history, ambition, and wounds. That may be part of what drew them together. This was not a teenage romance. It was a relationship between two people who understood public pressure and private rebuilding. They married on June 22, 1985, in Dallas, Texas, while Victoria was still one of the biggest stars on Dallas. The symbolism was almost too perfect. The actress, who had become famous as Pamela Barnes Ewing, married a Beverly Hills surgeon in the city that had made her a household name. For a while, the marriage seemed like the stable chapter she had not found before. Harry was not a struggling actor threatened by her schedule. He had his own career, his own prestige, and his own identity. Victoria seemed to have found someone who could stand beside her without needing to compete with her fame. They lived in Beverly Hills and remained married for more than 20 years. In Hollywood terms, that is a lifetime. This is why the divorce shocked people. Short celebrity marriages are easy to dismiss. A 21-year marriage is different. When that ends, people assume there must be a dramatic secret. And with Victoria and Harry, the rumors came quickly. But the truth, as usual with Victoria Principal, appears to be less about one explosive moment and more about a long process of realizing a life no longer fit. The marriage behind the image. For years, Victoria and Harry seemed to represent a certain kind of Beverly Hills success. She was the actress turned entrepreneur, author, producer, and skincare figure. He was the respected surgeon. Together, they belonged to a world obsessed with beauty, discipline, image, and control. But that world can be complicated for a marriage. When both people are powerful in image-based industries, privacy becomes harder. Every public appearance is read as evidence. Every rumor becomes a story. Every disagreement can be exaggerated into a headline. Victoria was also changing. After Dallas, she did not simply fade away. She built Victoria Principal Productions and later created Principal Secret, her skincare line, which became a major business. She wrote books on beauty, health, and wellness. She built a public identity that was no longer dependent on Hollywood casting directors. That matters because by the time her marriage to Harry reached its final years, Victoria was not a woman waiting for a man, a studio, or a network to define her. She had built her own empire. That may be the deeper tension. A marriage that begins with two people healing from the past can slowly become something else when one or both of them evolve. The person you marry in 1985 is not always the person you are still married to in 2006. Over 2 decades, Victoria had moved from actress to businesswoman, from television star to wellness entrepreneur, from Hollywood figure to someone increasingly drawn toward independence and philanthropy. If the marriage could not grow with that transformation, then leaving may have felt less like destruction and more like survival. The trouble that became public. Before the divorce was finalized, Victoria and Harry's marriage had already entered public controversy. There were reports of domestic violence claims, and Harry Glassman was arrested in 2002 and charged with inflicting corporal injury, though he was released on bail. Because these are serious and sensitive claims, they should not be treated as entertainment or exaggerated beyond the public record. But their existence did shape how people viewed the marriage. Suddenly, the image of a polished Beverly Hills couple had cracks that could no longer be hidden. The competitor script used that detail because it raises the stakes. However, the improved version needs to do something more careful with it. The point is not to sensationalize the arrest or pretend we know everything that happened inside the marriage. The point is to show that by the mid-2000s, the relationship was no longer simply private. It had become surrounded by legal, emotional, and public pressure. For a woman as protective of her image and independence as Victoria, that would have mattered deeply. When Victoria filed for divorce in May 2006, she cited irreconcilable differences. That phrase is common in divorce filings, but in her story, it feels especially fitting. Irreconcilable differences does not always mean one argument. It can mean two lives have moved so far apart that they can no longer be honestly held together. It can mean the public version of a marriage has outlasted the private truth. For Victoria Principal, who had spent her life refusing to perform roles that no longer belonged to her, that may have been enough. The $50 million breakup. The divorce was finalized in December 2006, and reports at the time said the couple reached an agreement over property interests valued at more than $50 million. That number instantly gave the breakup a new level of attention. In celebrity culture, money often becomes the easiest way to tell a divorce story. People focus on who got what, who lost what, and what secret leverage might have existed behind closed doors. With Victoria and Harry, rumors circulated that the financial settlement was connected to private information he might have known because of his work as a plastic surgeon. That rumor is exactly the kind of thing this story should handle carefully. It was part of the gossip around the divorce, but Victoria denied claims that her image depended on hidden cosmetic procedures or that she was being controlled by secrets. The stronger angle is not whether the rumor was true. The stronger angle is what the rumor reveals about how people viewed Victoria. For years, she had built a beauty and skincare brand around discipline, wellness, and self-care. Because of that, some people seemed eager to suggest that her beauty was somehow fraudulent. That says more about the public's obsession with aging women than it does about Victoria herself. At 76, that part of the story feels even more relevant. Victoria Principal has lived for decades inside industries that judge women harshly for aging, then punish them again if they try to resist aging. Hollywood wanted her beautiful. Television wanted her recognizable. The beauty business wanted her credible. The tabloids wanted her exposed. In that environment, her divorce became more than the end of a marriage. It became a battle over who had the right to define her. Why she really left. So why did Victoria Principal leave her husband? The simple legal answer was irreconcilable differences. But the deeper answer is found in the pattern of her life. Victoria left when staying required her to betray herself. She left medicine after the accident when she realized the path no longer belonged to her. She left acting temporarily to learn the business from behind the camera. She left Dallas when the role that made her famous threatened to define her forever. She left Andy Gibb when love became tangled with addiction she could not fix. And she left Harry Glassman after more than 2 decades, when the marriage no longer seemed to reflect the woman she had become. That is not the story of someone who gives up easily. It is the story of someone who knows the difference between loyalty and self-erasure. Victoria was loyal to Dallas for 9 years. She was loyal to her marriage for more than 20. She was loyal to her ambitions long enough to build a business beyond Hollywood. But loyalty, for her, never meant staying until there was nothing left of herself. That is what makes her different from the image many people had of her. Victoria Principal was not just a glamorous star. She was a woman with an unusually strong exit instinct. The new storyline is that Victoria's life was not defined by the men who left her or the men she left. It was defined by her ability to leave versions of herself behind. The medical student, the young actress, the soap opera icon, the romantic partner trying to save Andy Gibb, the Beverly Hills wife, the skincare mogul. Each version mattered, but none of them was allowed to become a prison. The woman beyond Dallas. After leaving Dallas, Victoria could have spent the rest of her career trying to recreate Pam Ewing. Instead, she built a separate identity. She founded Victoria Principal Productions and produced television movies. She wrote books about beauty, health, diet, and wellness. In 1989, she launched Principal Secret, a skincare line that would become enormously successful over the following decades. This was not a hobby brand casually attached to a celebrity name. It became a serious business and helped her become something Hollywood often does not allow actresses to become: financially powerful outside acting. That independence changes how we understand her divorce. By 2006, Victoria did not need a husband for status, money, or identity. She had already achieved those things herself. That can be threatening in a marriage if the relationship depends on old roles. But it can also be freeing. When a woman has built her own life, leaving becomes possible in a way it may not be for others. Victoria's financial independence did not prevent pain, but it gave her choices. And choice may be the most important word in her entire story. The beauty of Victoria's career is that she kept refusing to let one success become the end of her curiosity. She had been a Golden Globe-nominated newcomer. She had been a television superstar. She had been a producer. She had been a best-selling wellness author. She had been a beauty entrepreneur. And later, she would turn even more of her focus toward philanthropy, environmental causes, and animal rescue. That constant evolution made her difficult to reduce to a one headline, which is exactly why the divorce headline was never enough. The quiet life she chose after. In later years, Victoria stepped farther away from the Hollywood machine. She eventually focused more heavily on philanthropy, environmental work, and animal rescue. Since 2012, she has been associated with a ranch outside Los Angeles, where she rescues and rehabilitates animals. That detail matters because it shows what she chose after the noise. She did not chase reality television. She did not turn the divorce into a permanent publicity platform. She did not spend the next decade trying to prove she was still desirable or still famous. She built a quieter life around causes that mattered to her. That may be the clearest reveal of all. Sometimes the real reason someone leaves is not found in what they say during the breakup. It is found in the life they build afterward. Victoria's post-divorce life suggests she wanted peace, purpose, independence, and control over her own time. She had already spent decades being watched, packaged, discussed, and judged. By stepping back, she reclaimed something fame had taken from her: privacy. That is why her story still resonates at 76. She represents a type of woman Hollywood often struggles to understand. She was beautiful, but beauty was not her only power. She was famous, but fame was not her final goal. She was married, but marriage was not her entire identity. She could love deeply and still leave. She could build publicly and then retreat privately. She could be remembered by millions as Pam Ewing and still insist on living as Victoria Principal. Why the story still fascinates people. The reason people remain interested in Victoria Principal is not only nostalgia for Dallas. It is the mystery of a woman who seemed to have everything Hollywood offers, then repeatedly chose something else. She walked away from one of the biggest shows on television. She moved from acting into business before celebrity brands became the norm. She survived public romances, painful endings, and a long marriage that dissolved under intense attention. Then, instead of becoming louder, she became quieter. That is rare. Modern celebrity rewards constant visibility. Stars are expected to narrate every breakup, monetize every comeback, and turn every wound into content. Victoria came from a different era, but her refusal to over-explain now feels almost modern in its discipline. She did not give the public every detail it wanted. She let the official records say what it needed to say, then moved on. That restraint has kept people curious, because silence creates space for questions. At 76, when people say Victoria Principal finally reveals why she left her husband, the reveal is less about one hidden confession and more about the shape of her life. She left because staying had stopped making sense. She left because the marriage had reached a place where the differences were no longer repairable. She left because independence had always been the thread connecting every major decision she made. And maybe she left because, after decades of being defined by beauty, fame, romance, and other people's expectations, she wanted the one thing she had been chasing since childhood: a life that belonged completely to her. The real legacy of Victoria Principal. Victoria Principal's legacy is often summarized too simply. People call her Pam from Dallas, the woman who loved Bobby Ewing, the actress who left the show, the skincare entrepreneur, the ex-wife of Harry Glassman, or the former partner of Andy Gibb. But none of those labels fully captures her. The real Victoria Principal story is about self-authorship. She kept rewriting her life before someone else could finish the sentence for her. That is why her divorce from Harry Glassman should not be treated as the whole story. It was a major moment, yes, but it was also part of a much larger narrative. The marriage lasted more than 20 years, and that matters. Whatever went wrong, it was not meaningless. But when it ended, Victoria did what she had always done. She stepped into the next version of herself. She did not allow the divorce to become her final headline. In a strange way, Victoria Principal's greatest act of independence may not have been leaving Harry, leaving Dallas, or leaving Hollywood. It may have been refusing to explain herself in the way the public demanded. She gave enough for the record, then protected the rest. For a woman whose face had once been watched by millions every week, privacy became the ultimate luxury. So what do you think? Was Victoria Principal's decision to leave her husband really about one broken marriage? Or was it part of a much bigger story about independence, survival, and refusing to be controlled? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the hidden lives behind Hollywood's most unforgettable stars, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next.